Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I'm willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Daniel Pontifrac, JQ in the house. JQ, hello sir. A bio, and then we're going to get into change fluency and all things change. Jay is a change fluency expert. As a change navigation strategist, keynote speaker with over 15 years of innovation experience, he's created more than $2 billion of impact for 400 plus executives around the world by designing, developing, and delivering organizational transformation. But for those that don't know JQ, his story extends far beyond the professional arena. Jay is a half-blind cancer survivor whose life is a testament to resilience in the face of adversity. His remarkable blend of professional experience and personal resilience equips leaders to navigate uncertainty with confidence and connection. Jay spent his corporate career working at places like Deloitte, NameCheck's TELUS, and ADP, where he led mission-critical strategic transformations. This included $150 million primary care health policy reform, a $13 million tech transformations, doubling app users from 1 to 2 million, and scaling 15 product lines to over 35 million smacks in about 12 months. At the age of 19, JQ became the world's youngest distinguished Toastmaster. Fast forward to 2024, PMI inducted Jay as a Future 50 honoree for his work on enabling organizations with AI adoption. His new book, of which we will chat about today, Change Fluency, 9 Principles to Navigate Uncertainty and Drive Innovation, is a bestseller. And it is amazing. And I was an early reader, and I'm so thrilled to be here today to hang out with you, JQ, about it. So, okay, let's get into this. So in the book, right after kind of listing trauma after trauma from pandemics, economic shifts, tech, environmental pressures, all kinds of social, political movements, you write, change can't be managed. It is something we must become fluent in, which is kind of like the maxim of where this book goes in its parables as well as its real world hidden ventures that I would say are behind some of the writing. So tell me a bit about that line. Change can't be managed. It's something we must become fluent in.
Yeah. Gosh, Dan, can I just say how thoughtful that first question is? I love that. It all stems from the notion of, we have gone through so much change. People are tired. You're getting hit with reorgs and, political shifts. And you named all of the ones, right? And I got to this realization that we as a society, in our battle to manage and control our environment and changes that are surrounding us, as a society, we've become so accustomed to change. But I wonder how well we are at navigating it, right? And so that's where the whole notion of change fluency came around. Of we're constantly exposed to it, but what do we do with it, right? Are we speaking the language of change with fluency? And if we feel like we were being bombarded by all of these disruptions, what are those muscles? What are those habits that we can develop? Where do our mindsets need to shift to see change a little bit differently as something that we move through with ease? And then that's where the quote came from. What did you take out of it, out of curiosity?
Well, I felt compelled to ask the question because I have a very similar ideology. I think change and time are one of the same, and I don't think you can manage time, much like you cannot manage change. There's a fluency in change that I agree with your thesis, central argument throughout the manuscript. But also, I don't think you can manage time. I think time is an investment, and like change, you have to invest the cycles and build the muscles in which to become fluent in it. And so, when I think about that, where do you believe that, or what's convinced you that sort of the old idea of change management or managing change has run its course? Like, where is it that you saw it needed to become more fluent, pun intended?
Yeah, and you know, the catchy way for me to like attack everything would be to say change management is old, it's archaic, right? And there are many principles within change management that I still think hold true, right? Like, are people aware? Do they have the desire, et cetera? Um, but I think in our world today, because technology is shifting so fast and our strategic priorities in our organizations are shifting constantly, especially if you sit in product, right? There's this notion of what I was working on last quarter might not be what I'm working on tomorrow.
Yeah.
And how do we have love and ownership in what we're creating, but then also be okay with separating if the direction does change so that I'm able to pick up something new and say, oh, okay, mandate's different. I felt really strongly about this XYZ service line that I was building, or this process that I was nurturing, or this team that I was creating. And that's actually no longer the case. How do we shift our mindset in that moment of, oh, so and so person is telling me to work on something completely different? How do I dive in with both feet in?
Hmm. I have this, we both do talks, both do workshops. We're very much, I think, cut from similar cloths, if not the same. I have an adage or an axiom that I use every now and then. Um, Change is a constant, but you are not.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Because we're constantly evolving. Yeah, I
Exactly.
love that. There's this I don't know if I included it in the book. I don't think I did, but it's a little dark. It's the notion that a piece of us has to die in order for a new piece of us to flourish and evolve.
It's very Jungian of you.
Yeah, it's good because it's so true, right? Like I think about everything I obsessed with last year. It was the thing, right? I wanted to build, I wanted to make it beautiful, I wanted to put my love into my work. And as we shift into different areas of our careers, of our lives, as our roles shift, right? What do we need to let go of? And what mindsets do we need to keep intact to push ourselves to achieve a little bit more?
Interesting. You bring up in the book like language as in a sort of a metaphor, right? Or learning a new
Yep.
language, I should say, right? For helping you through that developing that fluency with change. Um, But perhaps, like another way to look at it is, do you think that some people have an ingrained muscle memory that they're unable or perhaps unwilling to disrupt to plow through the change and thus to ergo learn, that new language, metaphorically?
Yeah, and by the way, I think this applies to all of us. We took a look at, the 400 organizations that we had worked with, and most importantly, not even just the organizations, but the employees who were experiencing the changes. And what we found was that all of how they wrestle with change came down to their change mindset, which is all based on just two things. You read the book, but for all the audience listeners, it's how are we interpreting change? Do we see it as a threat or as an opportunity? And then how are we responding to change? Do we see it as something that we're frozen, stuck, resistant in, or adaptive and proactive? And based on where you fall in that two by two, you fall into one of four change mindsets. Are you an observer? Are you looking to defend against the change? Are you trying to sabotage so you're proactive and you still see change as a threat, so you're sabotaging what's in front of you, the change efforts or the transformation efforts that are coming? And then the fourth one is if I see change as an opportunity, but I'm adaptive, that's change fluency. And most people think that all the other change mindsets where you're seeing change as negative are bad. But that's not true. That's actually just human nature. If you told me that, my dog got hit by a car and I have to rush home, I'm going to be instantly trying to fall into a defender mindset to say, okay, that's a threat. How do I make sure that I do everything that's possible to save my dog? You think about AI, you could say, hey, of course you need to be change fluent with AI, and I'm totally on board with that. That's everything my organization does. And there's the polarity of you having a defender change mindset of, well, AI is great, but we probably need to think about the cybersecurity risks, the information, the data, the confidentiality, all of that too. And so I would say that fluency has you finding out where you're falling on the change mindset spectrum so that you can re-engineer towards seeing change as an opportunity and being adaptive to it. I'll pause. What's resonating with you? What
Yeah,
questions are you
well,
sitting
I was
in?
going to say you've done a really extremely credible job in the book of bringing in characters, but then lenses are really important. So whether the character is looking at things as an individual or as part of a team or at an organizational level, Artemis, et cetera, right? You kind of have also added in the 3D dimension that change is both an individual thing. When you work in an organization, change can be team based, i.e., how do we handle this as a team unit, et cetera. But then there's organizational change. And again, you as the individual or you as the leader looking at the org where it needs to go, et cetera. So I wanted to layer that on with your fluency piece is that help people see now the dimension that you're or dimensions that you're alluding to.
Right. And it gets so complicated so quickly, right? As our work and our cultures that we work in are deeply complex. The people that we work with are, humans with minds of their own and their own points of view of how they're seeing things too. A good example is, a friend of mine, he works in software development. And like any good software development company, they've gone through a bit of a reorganization over the past year. And some of his colleagues are taking the changes really poorly. They're thinking to themselves, well, what do you mean I'm getting moved to a new team? I spent the last 10 years building this product. And my friend, Brian, he's sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Because I've been here for 3.5, 4 years. And despite that, I'm really good at my job, but I'm kind of looking for something new. I really like the new team that they put me on. We can react to the same changes in such different ways, to your point. It actually all starts at the individual level.
Mm.
And if we can figure that out first, that'll bubble up to your point to the team and then to the organization.
And when you are introducing the various kind of, well, the change fluency framework with sort of those discover, design, differentiate, like those 3Ds, can you unpack that for us? Like how an individual might use discover, design, differentiate in a way that allows them to actually not just handle the change, but to your point, be fluent and sort of be malleable and positively accept the process that they have to go through. To your point, change is happening all the time, and so I found
Mhm.
it felt compelled with your book and the change fluency framework, which I know that you teach and keynote about and facilitate and all kinds of good consulting you do. But tell us about those 3Ds, discover, design, and differentiate, and what that three-part framework lends itself to as someone can be more fluent with the change.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. It builds on the question you asked about what my thoughts are on traditional change management.
Mm,
You could look at change management as a function or something that you do. But where I wanted to go with this book is see things beyond just change management as a thing that we do, but actually overlay so much of the goodness that we see across other functions. Where I'm going with this is when you think about the 3Ds, discover, design, differentiate. Discovery isn't about change management at all. Discovery is all about strategic foresight and futures thinking. So how do we expand our lens, zoom out to zoom in to find different noises within the signals? or find different signals within the noise.
Yeah.
Um, Design, so designing the future, is not about change management at all. It's actually about design thinking, working in wonder, evolving our vision, right? Trying to apply different lenses that we know work within product and strategy, customer experience to evolve what our current state is to something better. And then differentiating with cares, or sorry, differentiating from the standard is thinking through what I've seen across the landscape, thinking through what I want the future to be that's different from our present state. How do we then differentiate from the standard experience that we're all used to? What's going to make us different in tomorrow or next quarter from our competitors? And I believe that, a lot of it stands to be how we create the future, which means how do we make our missions personal?
Mm.
How do we create with care, etc. So hopefully that helps. But and that's the funny thing, right? Change fluency could be looked at as a how do I navigate change? And then the second part is how do we drive innovation and
Hmm.
growth? Because navigating change for change's sake, that's a survival technique. But driving innovation and growth, that's looking to say, okay, what are we building? What are we creating here?
Yeah, and that's where I think with people listening or watching, they should glom onto this with the book itself. Is that I found it to be through the stories and the parable itself, not just a become fluent in change book, but a culture of innovation and creativity direct message. And when leaders finally get over the fact that change is a constant, but you're not, i.e., like you are always evolving, but so too should your business. And whether
Mm,
you're public sector, not for profit, or for profit, and you're in products and innovation and services, that doesn't matter because of the societal changes that happen, whether that's AI or environmental or socioeconomic or political, whatever the case is, like things are different on an ongoing basis. And so you kind of have to have this nimble, fluid design thinking DNA as a culture. And if you don't, then what happens? I mean, we all know the Kodak and Blockbusters, et cetera, stories and Quiznos, right? Like we know
yep.
when you're not innovating. And I think that comes down to what you're provocatively suggesting in a way that's also direct and kind. Um, no, you can actually make this a culture of innovation by employing the tactics that you have in the book.
Yeah. 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 Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, Dan. It's funny, and I think to make this real, I just think about some of the clients that we've been working with, right? Two industries that have been affected really drastically in 2025 have been, at least in Canada, real estate and construction,
Hmm.
and then manufacturing.
Mm.
And traditionally, manufacturing, well, let's start with real estate and construction. Traditionally, they're looked at as, a bit slower to move, a lot of regulation, not a ton of innovation within building houses, right? A design is a design is a design. You're going to build things in very much the same way. What we noticed is because this year has been such a downturn in real estate and construction, profit margins are being squeezed tremendously. Prices have dropped like crazy. And for the organizations and developers who are still left, they're left asking, how do we continue to maintain what we have? But some of my clients have been sitting in the space of, well, actually, beyond this year, how are we thinking about 2030 and 2035? How do we build buildings that are future proof? And for the ones who are able to pause and create this culture of innovation, they're setting themselves up to be an employer of choice because they're embedding these principles of continuous improvement and innovation and creativity into their organization now. And anyone who's working in real estate is thinking to themselves, that's a pretty cool spot. I want to work there. The alternative is going to work for XYZ other developer who's, struggling and they're really good at what they do, but they haven't really made any changes over the past 5 years. And they're getting hit this year. So
Mhm.
It's fascinating
Do you
seeing
think
it
it's
unfold in real life. Go ahead.
do you think that it's in part like some of you bring up these chains in the book and these kind of very vivid descriptors of impediments, I'll say, or hurdles to overcome, clutter and chaos, being one,
Hmm.
in this kind of the swirl of competing priorities, or the clutter and chaos of do more with less, the clutter and chaos of so many things on the go, and people are busy and can't see the forest through the trees, so to say. So tell me a bit about the impediments, the hurdles, the things that you observe in the work that you do, and ultimately some of the chains you've put into the book that are causing real estate verticals, or um, product and service verticals, manufacturing, Algoma Steels of this world, looking at themselves saying, "Oh my gosh, what are we doing and where are we going?"
Yep. So there are five chains of change. It's a way for you to quickly assess, no matter where you are in any organization, what is holding you back. And some of them are overlapping, right? But to your point, you identified clutter and chaos. So there's so much noise within the organization, and things are moving so quickly that finance doesn't talk to marketing, doesn't talk to ops, doesn't talk to people and culture. There's apathy, meaning, you know what? We could make a change and innovation piece, but nah, I'm okay. I'm good with my current state.
Yeah,
Feels like a lot of work
yeah.
for me to do more things, right? So
Yeah.
why bother?
Why change now?
Yeah, exactly. Closely tied to that is the comfort with the status quo,
Hmm.
meaning, you know, and I've done this too, by the way. I've had this chain. I've owned this chain, holding myself back in the sense that maybe I've built up a team or a process over the last 2 years, and I feel such an attachment to it that I'm okay with how things are.
Hmm.
You know, things are going pretty well. I know exactly what my team is doing, and I know what they're going to do next quarter, and I know what they're going to do 2 quarters from now. The next one is competing interests. We think about organizational metrics and scorecards, right? So often we have different scorecards by departments, but they're competing with one another in the sense that, marketing might say, hey, we need to hit XYZ impressions over the next quarter.
Hmm.
Marketing will say, hey, we need to spend a lot of money to get there. And ops is saying, oh, well, we need to cut down our spend to be more efficient in terms of our operating margins. You can't be blowing more money on impressions. And at the same time, we have sales who is thinking, well, I need to grow my top line 20% year over year. I also need to spend money going to conferences and meeting people and socializing. And you start to look at what is our organization moving towards? Are we moving towards the same thing? Are are our interests aligned?
Hmm.
And sometimes they're not, right? So that might hold us back. Um, and so anyway, those are some of the chains that, you might take a look at and say, well, out of all of these, which one's affecting me the most? And if I can identify that, I can now figure out, now what do I do with that?
One of the points I really enjoyed, well, I enjoyed a lot of it, but the you bring up a term that I brought up in a book that I put out in 2013, which I loved. The fact that you brought it up, and that's organizational learned helplessness. And basing why I brought it up in Flat Army was because, having studied Martin Seligman's work at Penn and trying to understand what that was on an individual basis, and it's a terrible experiment. He later apologized for it, the whole learned helplessness piece. But organizational learned helplessness seems to be like one of your chains, meaning when either comfort with the status quo and this is how we've always done it then creates a disablement or a disengagement or a disenfranchisement, or like hands go up in the air, JQ, right? It's like, oh my God, like nothing's ever going to change here. How do you see that from that? Again, I know we talked about individual, team, org, but the organizational culture level, how does organizational learn helplessness play a part in not being innovative, not moving forward, not being able to see said forest through the trees?
So glad you asked that. I listed four of the five chains. The last one is constraints.
Yeah.
And this is the one that's the most common one that people will default to say, hey, I'm to your point about organizational learned helplessness. That's a constraint that's going to hold me back, and there's nothing I can do about it. When I talk about constraints, you might say time, money, resources, people, right? I don't have enough people to do that, so why don't you just give me more people? That's automatically just fueling the cycle of, oh my gosh, I can't do more until you give me more people or more budget in my headcount.
Mm.
And the flip side of that is if that's my biggest chain of change holding me back is constraints, what can we do that's a little bit different? I think you'll appreciate this example. We both came from TELUS, right? Um, I was over at TELUS Health for a few years, and right in the middle of the pandemic, our virtual care platform was running 20 to 30,000 virtual care visits a month. You might remember throughout the last 5, 6 years, the biggest thing about doctors and GPs and nurses was we didn't have enough.
Mm.
Physically, in person, virtually, it didn't matter. We have a talent shortage in terms of clinical care. As we were faced by an influx and spike in virtual visits over the course of the pandemic, our people couldn't run fast enough to serve the people that were waiting online. I might have a kid and they're sick and
Right.
I need to get medical attention. And what we found was that if humans were a constraint, which they were, right? We didn't have enough. What could we do that was different working around that constraint to still provide the level of service that we wanted?
Mm.
And what we did was, well, we found that, because we had so much data, we could lean on automation and AI to help triage things.
Yeah.
So, if you just needed a prescription refill, and I know that Dan needed XYZ drug, I'm not going to have you go through the entire care path just to eventually 20, 30 minutes later have me sign off on a prescription that you're just getting your third refill for. So we triaged based on what in healthcare the term is ICD-10 codes,
Okay.
based on the type of illness that you have. What kind of care path would optimize and who needed more time with a clinician so that we could improve the quality of care? And who needed less time? They didn't even want to see us. They're just like, no, just give me my drugs.
All right.
And of course, we would do the double checking to make sure the prescription was all right and it was necessary. But that allowed us to serve at scale many more people with technology, augmented. It was augmented virtual care visits, right? So
Mm.
how do you turn all of that to, thank you for letting me tell that story, all of that to pull on what is the constraint that we have and how do we work around that? How do we leverage the limits that we have, which is another principle in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, might I argue then, tangentially, that another constraint, although maybe it's in your C somewhere, um, is you bring up the phrase tyranny of the urgent, which I love. So I'm going to read actually a passage from the book because I think it can set up kind of what we talk about as practice for becoming more fluent with change. So you write, quote, most organizations fail to move forward because they're paralyzed by multiple competing priorities and constant direction changes. Everything happens so quickly that we lose the ability to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important. It's the classic tyranny of the urgent problem. So let's discuss this as a constraint, as one of those hurdles and impediments towards being more fluent with change. So tell me what's going on with leaders and executives and just individual contributors in their day-to-day decks and dashboards and crises and threads of all things in the world of their keeping up with the Joneses, if you know what I mean. Is tyranny of the urgent one of the more ruthless inhibitors to becoming fluent with change?
Totally. And this comes along with the boundaries of saying no. I'm gonna soon. I'll turn this back on you. Would love to see what you've seen in terms of tyranny of the urgent. But maybe I'll share one quick story. Tyranny of the urgent. The concept comes from struggling with the Eisenhower matrix,
Yeah.
right? Like what's urgent versus important and the four quadrants, which we all, for the most part, has it's a concept that's been taught for 20 years and
Yeah.
not longer. Tyranny of the urgent is saying like, oh my gosh, I don't even have time to identify that because I was supposed to work on project A or initiative A this week, and my VP just called me and said, drop everything.
Mm.
This is our mandate for this week because the CEO said so. It happens across municipalities, right? A good example is um, if something hits the news,
Mm.
right? I'm sure everyone can relate to this. Something hits the news, and it's all hands on deck immediately to fight that fire. And then a week later, after the fire's been fought, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm now late on all of the other things that were due. Tyranny of the urgent in action, right? Well, what about for you? What have you noticed when it comes to tyranny of the urgent?
A progressive deterioration of people's capacity to handle more. I think, um, JQ, there's an irony alert, I suppose, right? Where we thought, circa 2005 through to maybe 2015 that the technological advances would be able to, cut out uh, and carve out time in our cycles in which to do the real work, which is the thinking, the innovation, the leadership, the development, the coaching. But the last 10 years, what I've seen is a a continued devolution of people's souls. Like they are, in whichever way you look at it, from the APA surveying and assessments to Gallup's. It doesn't matter if you're in the professional side or the psychological, psychiatric side. It is not good. So whether it's anxiety, stress, um, any way you look at it, at any age, like you just see that people are the output is a higher level of OMG than what the technology purported it would do. And so I think that I'm in a worry state for
Mm,
the health and wellness of people and organizations, et cetera. That's not saying that it's inflicted, sorry, on everyone. I think there are really good examples of people that have been able to step back or been able to push back on the fire hose.
yeah.
But I think books like yours, which call out both from, I know vicariously, but some of your personal experiences, your professional experiences, and what other good natured people are doing to handle some of it in ways that are unique. I think that's what we need. But,
Yeah.
JQ, I wrote a book in 2016, 2017, published it in 2018 called Open to Think. The
Mm,
subtitle was Slow Down, Think Creatively, and Make Better Decisions. And the reason I wrote that in 2016, 2017 was because what I was seeing then. I've taken upon myself to now rewrite the book some, 8, 9 years later for publication at some point in 26 or 27, which is because it hasn't got any better. In fact, it's got worse, dude. Tyranny of the urgent is just now tyranny.
it's,
Long.
it's exacerbated.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I
Okay.
wonder
Well,
too, during the pandemic, if I found a lot of space for walks.
yeah.
It was slower. And then we went right back into the chaos of all of it. And there's this one brief anecdote in the book that I extrapolated from real life, right? And it was about Mai's chili oil,
Yeah.
and it was all about this Vietnamese woman who had created this chili oil with love, and she does small batches, and she runs a small business where she absolutely loves all of it. It's based in her heritage. She's able to bring out notes and aromas that, are true to her. And I wonder how much of that are we able to bring to our work,
Hmm.
right? The love and the care and the creativity, where there's a bit of a lightness to it. There's a levity to us playing around and work. And I think that's where we do our best. That's how we bring our best work to life is by introducing the play element of it. So the book actually, was an output of me wanting to create for fun. I thought to myself, I haven't done anything really creative in the last few years. What would it look like if I just jammed? And I'll be honest, in this very same breath, I feel like a hypocrite
Why? Come on.
because I love being creative and when we speak, we create a lot of content and that kind of thing. But I used to play a lot of piano.
Hmm.
I haven't touched my piano's got dust on it. It's been sitting there for 2, 3 years, and I know that brings me joy. But I'm wondering, how do we bring in more of that into our life? Because when that happens, I think we're actually able to create and take things more with a grain of salt because we know that what's in front of us, the tyranny of the urgent, that's not the only thing. What do you think? Let me ask you this. What do you think is most important when you think about, the devolution of all of us running like crazy and burning out and being anxious and stressed? What are some of the things that you think are most important for our leaders today when it comes to creativity?
I think the axiom, which seems pervasive, and a conjoined twin to tyranny of the urgent, is do more with less. And that's rife and ripe throughout an organization at the senior-most levels. And so you see this now, and the proclivity for leaders to say, no, like throw AI on it, and that's gonna help us become more effective and efficient. I don't think we know what do more with less means. I don't think that we have defined the clear definitions of what capacity means, what actually efficiency is, and how you measure productivity. And so with do more with less, we've actually become a do less with more culture, which has created your tyranny of the urgent point.
Hmm. Yeah. And if that's the problem that's holding us back, um, any solutions or any, where do you think we need to go?
When I'm doing similar work to what you're doing and working with leaders and teams, et cetera, when I'm doing kind of my open thinking stuff, which isn't change per se, but it is certainly adjacent to how you innovate and be creative and thus be fluent with change. I ask leaders one of the first things I do is I ask people to bring their laptops, but open up their calendar. And I do what's called the calendar way audit. And I ask them to go through how they're investing time in the development of people, how many ridiculous meetings they have that don't make any sense, why a meeting is 60 minutes, can it be 33? And I just go through like line by line by line on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis and ask themselves, is this sufficient to where you think we need to go as a team or an organization when it comes to the muscles required to be creative, to get stuff done, and still care about everyone? I think the teeter totter on do more with less is completely to the ground on whichever way you want, and the fixation
Hmm.
on delivery is at the expense of dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I'm hearing you correctly, there's this call to action that's actually do less to do more too. I think about every, think tank, every innovation company that's claiming to innovate, right? A lot of what you see in common is you've probably heard with Google, right? They'll do like 20% days, right? Where like every Friday they just take off. And it's not off, it's deep thinking space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in complete alignment with you that I think, now more than ever before, we need to build buffer into our calendars. And oftentimes people can negate that and say, oh, what do you mean you have 3 hours blocked off for deep thinking? Like, what is that? Can you hop into this meeting? And the minute you say yes and let that, you start to roll down that slippery slope of back into the here and now rather than us taking a step back. I think building buffer is one of the most beautiful things we can do to sit back and say, hey, what's going on this week?
And what you've identified is what I would call either an org norm or a team norm. And when teams and leaders are not having discussions about what are the norms in which we will operate, like, base camp's library hours on Wednesdays where there's no meetings, or my personal norm of Friday, no meetings from 12 to 5. It's literally my calendar called DP Think Time. And it has been since 1999 because I'm a Ruby and slightly older. But the point is, to your point, Jay, like if the leader's not inviting and thus then demonstrating and role modeling what it means, and it just percolates and it becomes learned helplessness on a team or org level.
Yeah. Yeah. And when, I love that you bring up Basecamp's example. There's also the exercise element too, which can free us up, even
Yeah.
outside of thinking. You know how maybe I won't project. I was going to say, you know how I get all my best ideas in the shower. Um, it works the same way with exercise. I see some of the best leaders out there for lunchtime, they're gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mike, where'd you go? And he was like, oh, I have my workout from 12 to 1. I'm not going to sacrifice that for anything.
That's why I like riding my term 50 kilometers a week of a bike, my friend. I do indeed. Listen, I could chat with you for a while, and we're probably going to have to do part two to this because it's a lot of fun hanging out with you over coffee, but also just live with cameras rolling here. Your irony alert. I've got a book that you might want to read. It's called "Change Fluency: 9 Principles to Navigate Uncertainty and Drive Innovation." It's pretty cool author. His name's JQ. Jay, where can we find out more about you and the aforementioned book?
Yeah, come on. Thank you for the shout out, Dan. Everywhere books are sold, you can head on to changefluency.com or search us up on Amazon, the Barnes and Nobles, the Indigos, and to get your copy.
Amazing. Well, this has been a thrill. Really humbled as well by allowing me the chance to pre-read this when you're getting the thing going. And I really enjoyed it. I'd still enjoy it as I reviewed it this weekend. And also just think the world of you. You are a shining light, both in leadership, change, perseverance, but you're a pretty good guy too. And that's all makes all the difference sometimes. So thanks for being you, mate.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you. And thanks for having
Okay.
me on the show. By the way, like I was thinking back to you writing out the blurb and the endorsement, and I'm like, man, for you to be so generous with your time to read it in advance, back when I thought the book was crap and I was going through the edits, right? Before it became good, it took a few edits and you had provided just such good feedback on where do our leaders need to go. So thank you. May I just give you your flowers now while we're live? And so I appreciate that.
We'll edit that out, so don't you worry. Thank you, thank you. I'm just kidding. Everyone, please head over to jq.com, also changefluency.com. You'll be well worth your investment in time, as it turns out. Thanks for joining, watching, or viewing another episode, listening to Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract, today in the house, JQ.